Welcome back to another review, this time for the anime Jujutsu Kaisen Season 1, which had 24 episodes and was airing from autumn of 2020 to winter season of 2021. Synopsis on any list. The boy fights for the right death. Hardship, regret, shame. The negative feelings that humans feel become curses that lurk in our everyday lives. The curses run rampant throughout the world, capable of leading people to terrible misfortune and even death. What's more, the curses can only be exorcised by another curse. Itadori Yuji is a boy with tremendous physical strength, so he lives a completely ordinary high school life. One day, to save a friend who has been attacked by curses, he eats the finger of the double-faced specter, taking the curse into his own soul. From then on, he shares one body with the double-faced specter. Guided by the most powerful of sorcerers, Gojo Satoru, Itadori is admitted to the Tokyo Metropolitan Technical High School of Sorcery, an organization that fights the curses. And thus begins the heroic tale of a boy who became a curse to exorcise a curse, a life from which he could never turn back. Now, with season 3 on the horizon, I decided to go back and watch the first 2 seasons because I have not watched Jujutsu Kaisen at all. So, I'm fresh to the show, literally. I did hear a lot of, good things. People are very hyped about Jujutsu Kaisen. I also heard a lot of the bad stuff, especially towards season 2. So that is the only thing I really know. And domain expansion. I mean, it's one of those phrases you hear, like the One Piece is real, which doesn't really mean much if you don't know anything about the show. And I can definitely see why people like the show. Again, this is only season 1. I did not know about the movie. People recommend just watch it chronologically whenever they came out. Some people say you can watch the movie before season 1, yada yada. I'm gonna slot it between the seasons, just, because it seems the most sensible. And towards season 1. Now, animation, exceptional. Beautiful animation. The fights are looking awesome. Choreography is excellent. The fights, they feel very natural, very smooth. It feels like a real fight. The fight someone could have. Naturally, we also have superpowers, but aside from that, whenever punches fly and fists are being used, it feels like a real fight, and it looks awesome. Really good animation, really good art style. It is just really nice to see what is on the screen. Then we have the world. We don't really get introduced too much in season 1. There are a lot of questions still in the air. We don't really get too much background. We get a little bit bits and pieces here and there, but most of our characters are still very, they have shadowy backgrounds. At least as, in season 1. I assume we will get a lot more later on. The power system, very interesting, that you have these curses that are more or less you try to fight the curses with the help of other curses or curse tools or powers that you use with curse energy. Okay, cool. I really like the concept of explaining your powers makes them stronger. Because in shows, it is always oh, I have to explain my power because the viewer doesn't know what my power is. But if I explain my power, it's a little bit weird in a fight. But if my power gets stronger, if I explain it, now it makes sense. And now I have exposed my weakness a little bit. Okay. Nice concept. Okay, I can get behind that. Story-wise, you know, we follow Itadori, which is the spiky-haired guy in the middle. And, you know, he is just a normal dude. Normal, question mark. He has like superior physical abilities. He is super strong, super fast. A little bit weird. That is what I mean. We don't really know much why he is like this, because there seems to be more to him. And he then takes in the curse of what they describe as double-faced specter, or better known as Sukuna. And now that he has Sukuna in his body, he has to fight against him to take or keep control of his body. I don't really know why. It feels like since then he has to be in, you know, this anti-curse school, and, you know, he has to train. I don't know if he could have been here without Sukuna. Let's just assume he never ate the finger. He just went to the school, he trained, and could he have done that? Or does he only have curse power and so on because he ate the finger and cursed himself? That is the one I'm a little bit unsure. However, he ate the finger. He now has Sukuna in his body, or the consciousness of Sukuna in his body. And now he has to fight to keep control. Stuff happens in the first season, not gonna spoil it. But there's some interaction. Now, Itadori, he's a fine character. He's like the goody character who, you know, is always up for stuff. He seems like a fine character. He is mostly following the, you know, whatever his grandpa said, and that is like, hey, try to help people, and that is what he's trying to do, or save. One of the two. We also have the girl who is from the countryside. I'm really bad with names. I only remember Megumi because it's very close to Megumin. Nobara Kugizaki is the girl. I like her power. It is very interesting. It plays on the whole cursing kind of, you know, what you see in Japanese horror stuff where you curse with straw dolls and stuff. She uses powers in that vein. We have Megumi, which is the spiky-haired guy in the back. These three are more or less your group, your trio, which seems to be like ongoing stuff for shows. It feels very Naruto. We have like the trio, 2 guys, 1 girl. We have like the Labrador dude who's like always happy to be there. He's just trying to help. We have the girl who is stronger than you would assume, and then the cool dude who is always the main focal point for everyone. It seems like we have the same, and then you have like the teacher, which is the quote-unquote teacher. In this case, the silver-haired guy. Now Megumi, he has like shadow powers, or he can summon creatures from the shadow, which is interesting because I feel like you can do a lot more with a shadow. I feel like you could maybe not catch, but imprison people in shadow. Maybe you can use the shadow to use stuff like shadow teleportation. Maybe that is something he gets to do later on. We will see. But, you know, interesting. And then we have the two main characters, which I feel like are the two coolest characters in the show. That is Gojo and Sukuna. Those two just are the most interesting characters, in my opinion, or the most badass, I should say. Gojo, he has a, blindfold. You do see his eyes. Very beautiful eyes. Again, he's very Naruto, because Kakashi had his, face covered as well. Here we have a blindfold, which is like, okay, if I had, I see some parallels. Maybe, maybe it was not intended, but, he is very Naruto-esque. At least in the group dynamic or group build. Now, Gojo, he is a badass. He is, as stated, one of the strongest or most powerful sorcerers. And he just styles on people non-stop whenever he gets serious. And very beautiful eyes again. I do like, because in every episode we have like the normal episode, action, stuff happening. And then at the end we have like a Jujutsu stroll or whatever. Which is like a little, side adventure, something fun to break up the action and the seriousness. I do like that Gojo is showing his eyes whenever, he gets serious, or whenever he has to fuck with people. There was a scene where he fucked around with Megumin and, had to unleash his beautiful eyes. Which, I like the idea. He is also a very goofy character. He doesn't really take stuff too serious, at least on the surface. Behind the surface, he's always, contemplating stuff. He has his suspicions, and he's trying to move levers for the betterment of, the whole organization. And then you have Sukuna. Sukuna is a big question mark, because the whole thing is that Itadori ate one of his fingers. Because Sukuna, I don't really know what the deal really was. I only know Sukuna was very powerful. I have no idea how he got defeated, or did he get seared, or what is with the fingers, but supposedly his power is, in those fingers, and he had 20 fingers because he had 4 arms. And, the idea is to more or less feed Itadori all these fingers, because he seems to be compatible and he seems to be able to suppress Sukuna. So they want to feed this dude all the fingers and then potentially kill him, because if he dies with all the fingers in him, then all the curse of the fingers, Sukuna, would then die as well. That was, at least at the beginning, the idea. Now there was internally in the curse, anti-curse organization, I don't know what they call themselves, there was some discussion that it is too dangerous, and that is where Gojo is more or less at odds with the Older Guard. The Older Guard is like, this is too dangerous, we need to get rid of Itadori now. Meanwhile, Gojo is like, we can use Itadori, let's feed him the fingers, and at the end, maybe to get rid of him. There seems to be more going on behind the scenes. I don't know if we will ever get more answers. Maybe the movie is going to answer some of those questions. But regarding Sukuna, he's also badass. He is super strong, and even only having like a couple fingers is more than enough to defeat some of the strongest enemies that the show has, shown us at this point, which is very interesting. There's also a lot of questions about him. One of them, we see him, he is, or his consciousness is trapped in Itadori at the moment. And we see him whenever he's inside Itadori. We can see whenever he has to say something, or you as a viewer have to see that he acknowledges something, the typical. We see his personification inside Itadori, which, as far as I can tell, only has 2 arms. However, we know he has 4. Now the question is how? Now, one of the potentials could be that whatever we see is not his final form. Maybe he's just not, he doesn't need to have 4 arms because he doesn't have more than 10 fingers. I would tend to that it's just not his real form. I believe we saw his form once, but that is too far, in the past, can't remember. Additionally, we see him in more or less inside Itadori. The question is that his soul we see, is that maybe his domain expansion? Because he seems to be, very powerful in that area. And then the question is, if that is the case, is the soul maybe the domain expansion? Additionally, domain expansion, we see a couple of those being used. And the show describes them as double-edged sword, very powerful, but it takes a lot of energy. The question I have is, are there multiple stages? Is it like you can have a domain expansion that you use, and then you can have a second level that you use and it takes even more energy? Again, just a question mark I had while watching the show. These are just, ramblings of my mind that I can remember, which is the whole point of me talking about anime, is just rambling, and at the end I have a random rating for you, Apart from that, we see the enemy. I can understand somewhat the, reason the enemies are moving. Some of the enemies, or one specific, I have no clue what he is about. He's the only one that makes not as much sense at the moment. What else? We saw more characters. We get introduced to a bunch of other characters with different abilities, some who have no abilities, and different strengths. Very interesting. Some of them, we get introduced to different, more or less, not power scaling, but modifiers to the power. One of them already explained that if you explain your power, it is going to get stronger. The second one is that you can have like a negative to yourself that could increase your power. There's a character that is described that has, a lot of physical disabilities, but for, as compensation, he is very powerful or has a lot of curse energy. So there seems to be something going on there. We will see how that, turns out. There's a binding vow that we see where you can have like more or less a contract. Now, the question is, can you renege on that contract? Is it not bindable at some point? That would be a very good question. Again, these are all things that we, as examples, the binding vow, we don't really get explained as much, or we don't get too many examples. So we will see how this continues in the show. What else is there to say? We naturally see a bunch of other curses and enemies and how their power works. It is a very enjoyable action show. Again, not as much background yet. We will see how that continues, but animation is just really, really, really good. The fights very enjoyable to watch. Characters are, some of them I like more, some of them I don't like as much, naturally. Overall, I would say the cast is enjoyable. The world itself, intriguing, especially some of the characters. Example, Gojo as well. We don't really know how he became so strong. Why are some people stronger than others? Again, I try to be somewhat vague and not spoil too much. Overall, a very enjoyable show. I'm going to watch the movie and season 2, hopefully before season 3 starts, so I can watch that as it is coming out. Ratings, AniList has it at 84%. My anime list has it at 8.52 at nearly 2 million votes. So that means that a lot of people have watched it, or rated at least. And it still has 8.5. That is more or less, hey, you should just give it a chance. I would say season 1 definitely a strong 9 out of 10. A very strong 9 out of 10. If I had watched this in 2020, probably would have even given it a 10 and recommended it to all my friends. That is what a 10 for me is. It's something I just, recommend to people even if they don't ask. It's like, hey, you should watch this. And I still am of the opinion you should just watch Jujutsu Kaisen. Give it a chance. Give it the good old 3 episodes. You're not going to be disappointed. Now, I do want to ask one part, and that is regarding the binding vow. This is a spoiler. So, again, spoiler. So, we have a binding vow between Sukuna and Itadori. Is that ever going to expire? Because at the moment, he is only allowed to be out for a minute or so. I don't remember the time frame. Or 10, one of the two. He's not allowed to kill people. However, what if Itadori eats all the fingers? Is Sukuna still being bound by that vow or not? Or is there maybe some other stuff we did not get told because Itadori doesn't have the memories, and maybe there's some other clause that Sukuna attached to that vow that we may have not heard. But if that one is in place, can you become strong enough to just ignore it? This, would be the question.